This is a podcast with Jamaica Lancee from Sensat and Chris Erry from Compendium Solutions. Welcome to our show, Leaders with Suspicions. I hope you enjoy.
Well, hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Chris. Nice to meet you.
Well, firstly, why don't you introduce yourself and tell me a bit about your background and your business?
Yes. Hi, I'm Jamaica. I work for Sensat, which is a digital twin company in the construction space. And I lead the marketing department, and it's a really fun ride.
So what attracted you to digital twins and construction and marketing? Tell me about your career and how you got there.
So I didn't know I was into construction until they reached out to me, and I looked at their website at the time and I thought, I can understand this. And it's very rare for high tech like digital twins to speak to the imagination. And so I was just instantly hooked as to, if this is not innovation, why isn't it already everywhere? I can't believe that, there are construction companies out there that might be working without it. And so that really got me very fast, very enthusiastic. And then the marketing side of it is, how do you communicate high tech to people that actually just build, or people, that have day-to-day qualms that have less so to do with software? And so it's a different challenge altogether. And from the space where I came from, marketing seems to be a good challenge to solve there.
Okay. But in your career in marketing, how did you realize marketing was for you and you were good at it? And who told you were good at it? And who are those mentors?
So I started off as an account manager, realizing I'm not made for this job. I'm not made for the endless quarterly reset of targets and sort of keep on chasing. And so I started focusing a lot on why are some people better at the job than others? And so I very quickly realized it's how you talk, how you speak, how you've tried to figure out how to solve a problem. And so I then got really into, surely there should be within a product. So I started focusing on product growth. But very quickly on, I realized it's not about the product growth, it's about how you market that product. And so I kind of gently became a product marketer, but at the time that didn't exist. So there was one article on Medium that said, product marketing, what is it? With a nice little Venn diagram, sales, product, and marketing. And then therein lies this PMM function. And so I started exploring that. And whilst I really liked it, marketing was sort of the afterthought. I came from a product-led vision. But where I was good at and what I got positive feedback on was trying to figure out, but how do you position something? How do you talk about anything that makes sense to, the mere layman as myself? And so positioning and messaging became my wheelhouse. And that's how I slowly started moving away from the product marketing and more into general marketing. And that's where I am now.
Okay, cool. So digital twins then. So I worked as a CTO in a maritime business called Greensteam, and we built digital twins of vessels, machine learning models, so that you could predict how they were going to perform in the future. And that business exited. And now I'm helping another startup where we're trying to build digital twins of business owners in terms of how individual business owners personally make decisions and how they would like to run their business. So it's kind of an anti-ERP thing. Rather than everyone having to fit into a process, it's like, how do the processes bend around the individual? But go on then, explain to me what you're building digital twins of in construction, because it could be anything.
So you're diving into a nest of different opinions, really. There are different opinions on what a digital twin is. For example, there are people that say digital twins are sort of models with all the real-time data that is possibly available to you. And so you have a real-time digital model of the thing that you're trying to build.
Is that what the data scientist said, yeah?
Yeah, yes, of course they do. Whereas where we believe it sits is you have different digital twins for different stages of sort of the problems that you're trying to solve when you are building large infrastructure. And so you have all this immense amount of data available to you, and you're trying to filter that through some sort of knowledge base, in our case, our platform. And then you filter that back to actually the people that you want to do the building. But you also need to use more than AI and all of sort of the smart piece so that you can mine more value from the data. And so where our digital twin sits currently is in how do we make vast disparate data sets available to everyone, and so that everyone can understand it. You don't need to be a specialist. And then how can you actually ask those data sets questions, and how can you try to figure out where potential risks may lie in the pre-planning phase, for example, of building a infrastructure piece.
Okay. And when you say infrastructure, how big, how many millions, what do you What's worth using your business for and what's not worth using your business for?
So the value of our product lies in the complexity. So the more complex a project is, the more value we'll derive out of it. So what we've seen, the infrastructure projects that we serve best are often linear, stretched over hundreds of kilometers of buildings. So think overhead lines, very utility focused, but also railways, road, all of those type of things, underground assets. Because where there the challenge lies is, do you actually know where that protected oak is? Do you know it? Do you know where other underground utility assets are? And you can find really specialist digital twins that help you solve the micro steps of building something out, but trying to understand where you're roughly going to put the next transmission line is a whole nother game. And that's where we come into play.
Okay, just tell me a little bit about the background, because there's a lot of commentary politically at the moment about the UK is a particularly expensive place to build infrastructure because we're all a bit squashed together. Yeah. So what was the genesis of this business?
Gosh, you call me out on this one. This was not in the script. The genesis of this business. Well, I think I'm from the Netherlands. So if you talk about a congested space, that's a congested space. So I didn't know this was the problem. But I think where we are seeing the biggest movement is because of target setting by the government, right? So for example, if you have a net zero target on your back, you need to build faster and more in a much quicker time space with arguably less manpower to do so because of a growing skill shortage. And so the genesis of Sensat in this case is, well, if you need to do more in less time, you need to do things differently, and you need to find out what type of innovation in your internal workflows you can implement to get this job done. And so where we then see the challenge of any tech startup is you can't just deploy a certain software and pray it will work. There is a little bit of handholding to try to understand what those individual workflows are. And these companies have a lot of experts that sit on a lot of knowledge, but aren't necessarily always pulled out at the right time in the decision-making meetings that are out there. And so when we deploy, we also provide loads of sessions with different type of people to bring them together in a room and say, okay, so how would you do X? Show me where that data lives and show me how you make a decision to go either down option A or option B. And so with that sort of hand-holding and trying to understand what they're trying to achieve, we see much more success for something like a digital twin to be adopted.
Okay. So what are in terms of the markets you're addressing, where are you targeting? Are they common pain points around the world, or are you focusing on these particular complexity congestion issues?
So we focus on the UK because the thing with infrastructure is heavily jargonized, and because of political programs, challenges differ across the globe. And so if we wanted to expand into other regions, which we are doing, we need to take the time to understand what exactly drives this tension point. And so we need to just, as a startup scale up, we need to pinpoint our resources to where we see the biggest traction. We currently see it in the UK, starting to see it in the US. What was the second part of the question? Sorry, Chris.
Industry trends. So, how much competition is there for this kind of technology around the world in your local markets, and how is the construction industry changing?
Yeah, so we see AI type companies popping up everywhere, and that's very exciting to see because there's so much. It's so hard to explain how much data there is available in this particular space, that it would be a waste to not see other AI companies tech companies jump on that and try to figure out how we can utilize that data to do things a little bit better. And so the competition is high, but at the same time, it's really hard to penetrate into this sector. So you have a couple of really big players that have a lot of resource available to sort of flick the switch and go into AI. And so where the challenge, I think, lies for a lot of the companies is to create a critical mass of clients to build the trust that you can do the job, because at the same time you have lots of regulations in place that you can't just try out everything you want. There needs to be some sort of due diligence, and there need to be some sort of provenness to tech in order to deploy it further. And so for any startup, you can't wait 2-3 years until something has been rolled out. So you need to do it in a very pressured environment. So whilst competition is everywhere and the trends of AI and data use are going up, it still is a change management piece, I think, on the humans that power or utilize that tech.
Yeah, that's quite fascinating because I remember in the maritime space, we had the challenge when I joined that business. Their first client was a really clever one, with sophisticated vessels, and you could do AI on the vessels. And this was going back 10 years. And the problem was the rest of the shipping industry wasn't like that. And you can sometimes design your startup for the first client you get. And I know people say you should do that, get an opportunity, build something and pivot out of there. Actually, getting a really great first client can be bad news in my experience because you have to really change your mindset for everyone else. So how have you found that with your product head on and your marketing head on?
So this is definitely a thing, right? Because you first start to ask, can we build something that is used? And when is that answered? Yes. Well, if we got a couple of clients. And so then you think, okay, we got a thing. But then you start, can we repeat the sale process? And then you realize, oh, we might have pivoted a lot into a certain use case. And so I think at the state we're in, we're definitely seeing that we invested heavily on the utility space and we understand it so good and our product is built for those workflows. And now we need to learn how to understand how to translate the product use into different workflows for other sectors. So we definitely have seen that, but you have to do that in order to build such a versatile product as a digital twin. You have to hone in on certain use cases, especially in a startup phase, to be able to speak that language if you need to convince 17 decision makers that, we're worth the money and investment.
So I'm assuming from a marketing point of view, you're having to create the market a little bit, right? You have to educate the market about what is the art of the possible.
Yes.
How
So
do you do that?
in real practical terminologies, we have to find our champions. So what defines that innovator that you spoke of earlier, that is so savvy, that kind of sees it and wants to take you on their bandwagon through their company? Because if you think about it, getting something so complex deployed at any company, you need some buy-in from a champion. So what defines the champion? This is often what we've seen, someone who is eager to try out new things. So they're a bit younger in these corporations. They have project management type roles, because what they have is, at least in our space, is they need to do a lot of work. They need to deliver a lot, but actually, how do I understand what's happening on the asset I'm trying to build or where I think I'm going to build it? That overview side doesn't exist. And so they feel the real pain, and trying to speak to that pain is, I found as a marketeer, easiest to be face to face. And so if you have such a complex product, but once you see it, you get it, number one thing you need to do is get it seen, not digitally, but go to those events, go anyone that has some sort of gathering that is talking about your problem space, and just be there with the iPad, because ultimately it's a visual product.
So I was going to ask about how you get those appointments, which is always a tricky thing with busy operational people, right? But I think you just said you hijacked them at conferences and things.
Yes, we've seen. So there are two things that we've seen that really works. One is events, not just trade shows, but just these corporations are so big, they often have internal events as well to do some knowledge sharing. And so even you only need to find one champion that wants to showcase you to get in. And it will actually make a little bit of room for yourself so that you can speak. And social selling. When I think about what makes us set apart from some of our competitors, is the presence that we have as a brand. It's not a huge presence because that requires a lot of resources, but it's the right presence that sort of lifts the bonnet as to what are we building? Who are the people that are building it? Because in today's age, they like the innovation part of what Sensat brings to an already sort of older tech set. And so you need to lean into that, because if you say we're a bunch of people that are very passionate about solving problems using modern tech, talk to us and we'll figure out with you what we can build. People seem to gravitate towards that because there are so many AIs popping up everywhere and so many tech helping you to make your best decision. It's nice for a change to speak to a human. And so that social selling piece as a brand seemed to work really well.
So I guess one of the other challenges is you're marketing a product that is relatively complicated and you have to have some faith in the benefits until you've done it once.
Yeah.
To an industry that's used to very long planning cycles, theoretically absolute certainty on how much things are going to cost. So that sounds like a psychology mismatch to me.
Yes. So we call it a death by 1,000 cuts. If you open a digital twin, more than not, you do it in a room with people that are building a thing. They go, oh, I didn't know that was an elevated landscape. wait, is it elevated? Show me. And so within a second, you spot an issue. That issue, longer down the line, could have cost you millions of earthworks if you hadn't seen it. So that's cut number one. And so you can't really say that you de-risk something because you don't know what the risk is. You don't know what you don't know. So it's really tricky to communicate the actual value of, in our case, digital twins or visualization because of that. And also you have a different sort of team that builds things versus that plans things. So there is a lot of complexity in the handover within an actual building lifecycle. And so for us, what's really important is communicating the smaller individual use cases, because it's exactly those smaller individual use cases that you can prove really well and everyone understand that pain. And if you just have that library available, that once you have that meeting, you can just spit it out. This is what we did for partner X. That makes the conversation much faster, much quicker, even though sometimes you don't really understand the language because they speak differently in highways, for example.
Okay, interesting. So you're actually not trying to sell the compelling transformation vision. You're trying to be practical on pain points. And then once you're in, they can start to develop the sophistication of how to use the product.
Now, that doesn't mean that that's where we want to be in the future. But you're still a startup and we can't adhere to 7-year timelines or whatever the timeline is that you want to bring transformation. So you have to find quick value to find multiple projects, because all these clients have so many different projects everywhere. If someone has this issue of an elevated plane, surely there is another one. And you just have to be a bit savvy with your go-to-market team to clock it, find someone that has a very similar pain point within their business, and within that sort of build that critical volume of different people talking about your product.
Does that mean that for your marketing, you actually have to analyze what projects people are doing?
Yeah, it's this is the challenge that I've enjoyed the most so far working at Sensat. I come from a space within Deliveroo where you just flick a switch and there are hundreds of restaurant owners that kind of understand the pain. So you play a hundreds of restaurant owners marketing play. Whilst here you have in the utility space that we're after about 15 asset owners, so 15 clients, but they're huge. So I don't need to play 15 asset owners marketing play. I need to play 3, 4, 5 of them. And so one of the biggest transitions that I've brought in is, okay, how do we move from a space of demand generation to account-based marketing? How do we do that? I mean, it looks good on paper, but actually that transition has been, I think, a good 2-year transition, and it's been joyous to watch, and with it comes its own challenges.
Right. And since you just said you came from Deliveroo where you weren't doing that, how have you learned to do that? And have you got a team to lead, yeah?
Yes. So, well, first you need to prove that it works, and then you need to find a team to actually then do the job, because I'm not an expert in account-based marketing. So I have learned, I was thinking about the question, what's the biggest initiative sort of that went well in my book in the last 3 years or so, and it's the introduction of account-based marketing. Because what happened, especially if you have such a small customer base, is if you focus with the right people on a very small problem of a client, and you take the time to understand the world that they're operating in and the news that they read, you can sell much faster. You can find the right people much faster. You speak the right language. And so what we did to introduce that transition is we just picked 2 clients. And with those 2 clients, we did a very sort of rough and ready account-based marketing play. And those 2 clients consequently saw this amount of growth, both in the product adoption, because you still need to educate how do you utilize the product on the micro level, but also on the selling side of things, where how do you then communicate that value to the next buyer within the same organization. That then led the way to, okay, now that we know it works, how can we scale it? And that's when I hired a very talented account-based marketer.
I have to say there is some irony in what you said earlier on about moving away from account management, that you're now implementing account-based marketing. That's making me smile.
Yes, that is true. That actually, no one ever told me that. Yes, that is true. It's fun, though, to understand what is the problem space that they operate in and being able to walk away and go to another one, which if you're the account manager, unfortunately, you own that account.
Okay. So at some point you hand it over and then it becomes the account manager's challenge to get more deeply into that account, or do you have to carry on working with them?
Well, we are still a small company. And so we have to pick our vices. And once we've done a certain thing, we have to move on, because scalability and repeatability is now the challenge. How do we do it again in a less longer time frame? How far can we stretch it? And so for now, we prioritize that side of the business and not the growth and onwards.
Yeah, I mean, one of the challenges I saw in the past with digital twins is the explainability. Yeah, in terms of how do normal business people understand what it's telling them and the implications of that. So your example about the elevation, like people get that, but sometimes the model or the twin is telling you a lot more, but you need to know what it's trying to tell you. Who does all of that? Is that some training team or is that account management?
It's a fascinating one. So we have a customer success team, a customer partnerships team, and they do all of that, right? Because you need to kind of coax it out of the people because they sit on those ideas, but they might not know when to bring it in. But what's really interesting is that what we've seen within the sort of the customer care side of the business is when they go to clients and then they host meetings and all these different people from across the business, they come into a room and they pull up the digital twin of a site. It's often the ecologist that says, I've tried to explain to you that we can't do it because of this and this reason, pull up this data set, and we sit there and we pull it up and we point at things, but it's actually the people that do the speaking. And so it's just enabling them to sort of use the tech in the right format for the specialist to tell them what challenges they are. I'm pointing at the white wall, but for the specialist to paint a picture of why they say what they say to their peers. No, you can't build there because there are badgers and the badgers have a radius where you can't build around. And so therefore you need to do option B, right? But option B we can't do because Mrs. Brown fence is there, blah, blah, blah. And so you kind of have different people of different walks of life in the same room explaining what's going on the site, where it does the talking itself. We just need to enable it.
That makes sense. The power of visualization.
Yes. And it's hard to put a price tag on that as to what would that save you, but it helps in a lot of ways.
Okay. And you talked about competition before.
Yeah.
Is it about speed or sophistication? What's your differentiation?
It's the visualization piece. Where we excel at is it's basically like gaming. You open it up and it renders so much faster than anything you've ever seen. So you can just render through your site and you can kind of go as deep and as open as you want. But within that, we have vast amounts of data sets. And so what you often have in this space is you have a technology that allows you to visualize your design, but then you need to go to a specialist and you need to ask a specialist for either the output or for access. In our case, you can just access it. Granted, there are controls in place, but you can simply ask the system to see what you want to see to then kind of get a much faster feedback loop as to what your train of thought is. And it's the visualization piece of the real world with all the other data sets that make it so impactful for people that work on projects.
All right, let's shift over to being a chief marketing officer, because I think the marketing realm is under some challenge at the moment. The era of content-led marketing, I can't work out whether it's the future or it's the past. Yeah. Because, AI is generating so much stuff to read that you need some AI bot to read it all. So, the old days of just put a few blogs out and content and the customers will come to me. I feel like they're over and we're actually about in a little bit of back to more outbound at the moment. But
Yes.
You seem quite content oriented because of what you do. So just generally, what do you think's happening to the marketing industry? What's AI going to do to it?
So this is a topic that keeps me awake at night, but not because it's stressful, but because the realm of possibilities is sort of endless. Earlier on, I said a little bit about account-based marketing. The biggest difference or the biggest change, the most rigorous change that I said from the beginning was we're going to stop tracking MQLs. Because it's a vanity metric, and in the space where we operate, it just does not equate to revenue. So why are we tracking it? Why are we putting all our efforts against a get in touch conversion? It doesn't make any sense. Now, it's dangerous to do that because then the question is, what do you provide? But because we stopped tracking MQLs, we stopped looking at content that converts. And so if you are a content-led machine that doesn't track MQLs, it doesn't make sense. So we started looking at content along the sales cycle because we've seen as soon as we talk with you, you get us. So how can we produce content that get us into a place where we can talk more to people? So that was pivot number one. Yes, of course, now that we have ChatGPT, basically you have an endless content writer, right? But in all honesty, if I look at our content pieces that perform best, that contribute to SEO ranking and all of those type of shenanigans, it's the personally produced content that does best. And it's a very interesting thing to see that you only need a few pieces of content that perform really well to be winning in an SEO game. But if you let go of the concept of MQLs, you don't necessarily need to look at what converts, you look at what has been read. And that's been a breath of fresh air. So if you look at how many accounts that we want to sell to engage with our content, then I can say it's a lot because I can track that easily. And that is a much more valuable indicator whether what we produce is being read rather than pollute the internet space with AI generated content. Granted, you use AI, because if you don't use it, it's kind of a golden egg, right? You can definitely utilize it, but it's not the enabler to produce 10x more content. That's my view of it.
So where do you put this content then these days?
So social selling is big. So much of the content that we produce is on LinkedIn and our own website. And you have a lot of personalized landing pages.
But I mean, there isn't a digital twin in construction weekly magazine or something that the type of people you want to read your stuff would gravitate to, because you seem to have a broad audience within your construction targets.
Yeah. So, you had a question earlier in the list around if you had unlimited resources, where would you spend it? Yeah, it would be PR.
Hang on. This one's for your boss, yeah?
Yeah, but it would be PR. Because to your point, yes, there isn't a digital twin magazine, but there is an NCE, new civil engineer magazine, where a lot of our readers are people we could potentially sell to, or that would have benefit from our product. Now, by nature of construction, there's a lot of public scrutiny, so it's not like they're going to say I saved 2 million. No one in their right mind won't want to say that. And so it's been a learning of mine that how do you get those use cases out there in an industry that is not necessarily jumping to share those wins because of the ramifications elsewhere. And so as the startup scale up that we are, I focus on those channels that we do have within our control so that I can service it with the resources available. So that is LinkedIn and that is these events and our own website. But there's definitely room for growth for the scalability piece with the traditional media and the traditional partnerships, but that comes with a cost.
So SEO is a little bit struggling as a concept right now.
Yeah, yes.
And people are now talking about AI SEO or
yes,
SEO. It seems quite immature to me at the moment in terms of working out how you make sure that AI knows you exist. Have you been playing with that at all?
Yes. So definitely it's immature. We're just cowboys in the wild, wild west right now. So what we do is we have sort of quarterly sessions with the team and we just play our wild cards. So what is a wild card? Could we figure out how often we are found on ChatGPT? All right, let's figure it out. And yes, we can. Now we know that. Now the question is, how do we bring that into our reporting model? Or how do we bring that back to the business as a value add? That's now the next question. So we're trying to figure out what story we can tell on the AI SEO piece. And we went back to what I find very exciting, to just testing and iterating. And just figuring out, okay, if we do this, will there be a knock-on effect on ChatGPT searches? Yes. Okay. Why is that? And we just work our way backwards. And it's been a lot of fun to be able to set up shorter sprints, because for a marketer, you can also go down we need to do content production and the value sits in the output that you produce. But we actually go back to, let's figure out with the content we do have, how we can get featured on the channels that we do want. Just a slight different take on the job. Granted, you need to find different people that fit that job role, but it's a fun space.
So without giving away all your secrets, could you give at least one tip of how you find yourself more in ChatGPT?
Yes. So I would say you need to write content to a real problem space. So the content that we are found on is content that speaks to, in our case, for example, we serve the water sector and you have their investment cycles called AMP8. This is very niche, but every single content piece that is of high quality that talks about the problems of AMP8 is being found in ChatGPT, not how Sensat solves a problem. Because I wish it would be, how does Sensat solve a problem? But that's not what people are looking for in ChatGPT. They're looking for other type of queries. So it's actually the sort of third tier thought leadership content that is found. And so what I would do is plot out your content, what is actually true thought leadership and what isn't, and see the impact from that, which is a bit tricky because that means that the marketer needs to get really close to, the customer facing teams and actually truly understand the problem space, which we don't always have time for, I think.
So the AI search tools are just scraping it off your website.
Yeah. Yes. And of course, you need to be optimized for more than just Google. So you need to be optimized for the Bings in the world. And there's some technical background that you can just flick switches on to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. So given the whole marketing world's changed and now you're in account-based marketing, and none of what you normally did matters anymore, what KPIs do you actually track these days?
So leads. We go down the leads route. That's a quite recent thing. So I bought this software called Demand Base because one of the challenges with account-based marketing is you have 15 heads that you are maybe talking to with your sales organization. How does that translate to amount of leads? And you can have 10 leads at the same logo. How does that equate to a new deal? And then you can have 15 deals under one logo. So how on earth are you going to create that funnel that we so desperately seek to tell anyone that we're growing the funnel? And so if you go down the account-based marketing route, you kind of don't care as much about how many contacts you talk to, how many leads you have. You care about where in the funnel does your account sit. And so we then started looking at ABM platforms, and we are trialing, this is our first year, demand-based. And so what that helps us do, and this is what I report back on, is how many accounts are searching around the problem space of digital twins, which is very novel because previously we didn't know how to actually track that, right? So now, even though we don't speak to you, we don't know who you are, we can still say that your account is looking for problem solutions that we serve a solution for. That allows us then to do very specific content to get you onto our website. And so now we can showcase the funnel on an account level. So I report on, instead of, for example, MQLs, here's the creative part, we do MQAs, so marketing qualified accounts, which then tells us, for example, which is fascinating because it tells us company Y has visited your pricing page, has done that, has interacted with these ads, has interacted with these social selling posts. And if you layer it on so thickly, you can say, okay, so in this account, there is definite appetite, they just haven't made themselves known. And so then we can go to events where these accounts are, to make themselves known and to find the right people because we know what you care about. And that makes it very sophisticated. But that's what we do.
I find this really fascinating because I spent obviously many years sitting in workshops where sales and marketing stab each other in the eyes about when the handover between an MQL and a sales qualified lead is. But this sounds completely different. This sounds like you actually all collaborate on the pipeline.
Yeah. So it warrants a couple of things. It warrants sales have target accounts, they have territory plans, because if you tell me I go after XYZ, then I'm gonna get XYZ in that funnel and try to get them further down so that they are hot enough for now the prospecting piece. In a world where we are going to go wider with more clients that we could potentially target, we can do the same thing and then help them prioritize which one are doing even more high value actions. We're getting to a point where we can be sophisticated about the level of the job role. So if you only have, the lower level of people searching, okay, then we need to find content that speaks to the higher level. And so we can get smarter at how we funnel the right person in. But I think that's more of a 2026 conversation. But yeah, it warrants close relations with the sales team. But you need to get comfortable that our value doesn't sit in how many MQLs we have. And that is just something that is always somewhere in the back of your mind. Wasn't it maybe easier when that was the case? Because then you could say, I've done my job, but I still am a firm believer this is the way forward.
You have to have the right sales leader to collaborate with, really, don't you? It is a lot about company culture.
Yes. And it's also a lot about how you communicate. How do you communicate effectively that it's working? Right? Because ultimately, if you do it right, which is what we saw with the first test 1-2 years ago, was you see velocity of growth at the accounts. But velocity happens like this. So you have that period where you go, I think it's working. And then all of a sudden you get the critical volume of growth in an account. And so, yeah, you need to have good relations with your other sales leaders or even the CEO, and then communicate it effectively back that it is working.
So what are your key goals for the next 6 to 12 months?
So it's the forecastable revenue piece. So if you think about that funnel that I just described. There is a lot going on to get a marketing qualified account. But because we are no longer sort of stage gating these funnel jumps, it's less easy for us to say how much goes in to get a new deal. And so I need to, for the next 6 to 12 months, get to a point where I can kind of pinpoint where, if we invest in X, how does that speed up sort of the funneling of those accounts through the account funnel. That's really the challenge for us to solve from a marketing perspective.
And I presume you have some targets. So you're looking at a 50% increase in marketing qualified accounts next year. What cliff are you facing?
The cliff that I'm facing is, that's such a dramatic thing. No, so I just want to have X amount of accounts that are in our target account book. I want to have in our pipeline deal open by the end of this year. So that's just a percentage of all the accounts that we say that we get. That's my target. And then on the other hand, there's also the good old-fashioned lead target. Because if you start working in concepts of MQA, you can still have 10 leads at an account, right? You just have 10 leads that haven't closed yet. So they're in that marketing qualified account phase, if you will. And so I am bringing back elements of MQLs because I think it does provide performance-based tracking as well, which is something that I just went completely left. And now I realize I have to go a little bit to the right again to make sure that we communicate effectively the value of lead gen, because sales still needs to have contacts to do outreach with.
Yeah, I found the word lead has been completely used in the marketing world. So are you talking about people or projects when you say MQL?
So I'm talking about projects. So basically what defines a qualified lead here is a person that has some sort of right to purchase the software or understands the process of how software is purchased. That is not straightforward at the organizations we target. And there needs to be a form of commercial opportunity, which often means a project that you struggle with and you don't see how to make that a positive ROI type of project, and you need to identify that. If you have those two elements, you're qualified, and then you toss it over to the deal pipeline. But with ABM, you never toss anything over. You kind of just mini celebrate that it works, and now we try to convert into a deal one.
So there's lots of challenges and problems you've got because you don't really know your ratios yet.
Yes.
You're developing a new approach to market.
Yes.
So how does your organization do its problem solving and solve these things?
So we learned at Sensat very quickly on trust the process, because if you don't know your ratios, if you don't know sort of what comes in, what comes out, you can only operate from what you do know. And so if you have 4 or 5 wins, take those 4 or 5 wins and work them backwards and set your strawman benchmark, and then be critical of that strawman and come back to it over and over and over again. So if you get comfortable with knowing nothing and just keep your eyes open and communicate things that you do know as you get smarter, you get a sense of progression, regardless that it's not these are the ratios, so these are the target numbers that you're going after. So that is something that I as a leader work on a lot, as in what warrants a celebratory win in learning more and uncovering more and more and more of that account-based funnel within Sensat. But then at the same time, I love nothing more than spending an absurd amount on pre-planning problem-solving things. So for example, if I need to solve getting this deal in the pipeline or this logo in the pipeline, then let's do that week of project planning, treat it as the project that it is, right? When are they going to be in the pipeline? In order to get to the pipeline, where do we think we're going to be in 3 months? Where do we going to be in 3 weeks? And we just work our way backwards like that over time. And I've had success working that way because you just need to make problems consumable. Make it a smaller problem and a smaller problem and a smaller problem. And all those smaller problems solve the bigger piece. I think that's a nice agile approach to problem solving in a startup where there are lots of unknowns.
So it's just amusing me that actually one day you sat down with your boss and delivered a conversation which says, I'm going to stop giving you any targets or management information for a while. Now, lots of people listening to this podcast will be thinking about difficult conversations they might have in their career. Yep. Can you tell me how you set that one up, right?
Yes. So you can only say, I'm not doing this anymore, if you then can explain why. This conversation has been a while, so I'm trying to, at the same time, recount how that conversation went. You explain why the thing that you're focusing on is not useful. And then you focus on, but where do you think you want to be in the next 12 months? And so I came at it from okay, I'm not going to do MQLs and all of the things that we normally do, website traffic growth and all of those things. But what I am going to do is these two logos are going to be in the pipeline. After speaking with sales, I think we can grow it to this. Is that something I get your blessing for? And I'll then find out that playbook, how we did it, so we can then repeat it and we can do it better. And that went surprisingly well. If you just keep hammering down that why you're doing things differently and why we're going to focus on what we focus on, there is a surprising amount of willingness of people around the business to go with you, because they feel the same pain in a different level of the business. Or, if you talk to the board, you have the same challenge. Why aren't you, doing the things that normal, old school or different type of businesses are doing? And so if you keep going down your why, you'll get very far.
Yeah. But actually there you traded some certainty about what you were going to do. Yeah. And
Yeah.
focus on stuff that intuitively made sense in terms of revenue targets. So, okay.
Yes, you need to speak that language.
Yeah. Okay. So what's been your best growth initiative?
Well, it's definitely those two accounts that I picked. Not only from a marketing perspective, but from understanding the misalignment between marketing and sales. So if you say to your sales guy, look, I'm going to spend all my hours helping your account grow. Tell me about what your ideas are. Tell me about what you've learned. There sits so much knowledge in the sales mind and in the sales apparatus that actually we've never really mined and then utilized for the marketing engine. And so when we start focusing on those accounts, and when I say we, at the time, it was just me and the marketing manager, jack of all trades, we started realizing there's so much more in the sales process that we never took the time to understand. And from that alone, I think I'm setting up ABM much smarter now, be much more realistic as to how many accounts can we go after per head. How long does it effectively take to produce the knowledge to actually sell to the right different levels that you need to sell to within a large corporation? So the ABM play.
Okay. And I've got to ask you the other question. What fell on its face? What didn't go how you wanted?
So remember when I said people just need to see our product and they get it?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out they need to see that product in their own context. And so when we did outreach with video, like high quality video outreach, that just fell flat on its face. And it was quite expensive to get high quality video content out there. Now, of course, granted, there is now AI tech that helps us do that faster to reduce the cost base. But if you see a digital twin with information that is not about your backyard, you kind of don't care. So yes, we're a visualization company. Yes, once you see it, you get it, but you need a lot of hand-holding to kind of see the vision come to life for your own project set. So I will continue with the video first. We just need to figure out when that type of content is best in the selling process.
Yeah, maybe for executives who don't have to use it.
Yes. For example, I did this thing over New Year's where we had like an Easter egg hunt in our digital twin. And I thought that's fun and people can go into the digital twin, find the eggs. No, it's just not. And that reaffirmed the knowledge you already had. If it's not about your own stuff, you kind of just don't intuitively get it. Okay,
so let's do a bit of reflection now. What would you say to someone else who's gone into a startup where they don't know the industry, and it's a fast-moving world, potentially in AI? What would you say to them?
Read Simon Sinek's Start With Why book and make it your own. If you just get comfortable with asking why we do things we do, why we sell it the way we do it, why does it look this way, why isn't it working, you can get very far in knowledge gaining, and you can get very comfortable by knowing what you don't know.
Okay, and other than the videos, what have you learned the hard way? It doesn't have to be in the current business that you've learned in your career.
I have learned the hard way that the customer, the voice of the is there really a voice of the customer in your company? Right? We all know what customers say to you. We all know what customers say they struggle with. But actually, I think if you are interested in going into marketing at any business, really, make ownership of customer data. Understand what they're actually saying, understand what they're actually doing, because otherwise you're always at the mercy of hearsay, and that makes marketing resonate less with your audience. And I've learned that the hard way. Yes.
And construction, not always known to be exciting, but what excites you most about construction and the pace of change in the world around materials or technology?
So we need more infrastructure, and we need it for all sorts of different reasons. So trying to understand what the challenges are of building critical infrastructure are just, they make global impact. How we produce things, how we're building things, how we're assessing risk. This will enable a lot of people to have more critical infrastructure available to them. And that's a very meaningful contribution, I think, from a tech perspective.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Jamaica. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you and ask questions about your business, should they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn on the Jamaica Lancee, and I'll respond to you. Send me a message.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.